Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Corombos of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
And very glad to have you with us for the Tuesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We have bad with an important good twist to it for our first martini. It's a little bit complicated. Definitely bad for the second one, and mostly crazy with perhaps a twinge of bad for the third one as well. And our first martini today, the Biden administration, they've been rolling with this Bidenomics platform as the linchpin to their reelection bid. And so far, it's been a really, really bad idea because their numbers on the economy pretty much match Biden's overall approval numbers, and neither one of them is good, usually below 40% now, depending on the survey. You've also seen Biden just yesterday saying that by some metric, this was the fourth least expensive Thanksgiving ever. I think most people would disagree with that. Corinne Jean-Pierre has been trying to do the same spin from the press room. We're also hearing that they're trying to counter, quote, disinformation about the economy because it's just so darn good. But here with the splash of cold water and the truth, and it's always good to know the truth, comes Bloomberg. Not exactly a bastion of conservative economic thought, but Bloomberg releasing a report yesterday demonstrating, as the Free Beacon puts it, just how severely inflation is impacting Americans. Cost of groceries has increased 25% since before COVID. Restaurant food increasing 24%. Water and sewage costs up by 16%. Rent up by 20%. Electricity by 25%. I guess you don't have to eat out. Everything else, you got to live somewhere, you got to eat, and you got to have water, and you got to have electricity. But that's not all. Average cost on food per week in October 2020, $238 for the average family. Now it's $315 per week. Childcare also up 32% since 2019. Car insurance up 33%. And of course, we've talked about the mortgage rates, which have soared and costing the average family $1,000 more per month on a purchase of a $400,000 home than it did just a couple of years ago. So, I mean, Jim, Biden can do whatever he wants to do here, but as we've said over and over and over again, reality is in the face of the American people every single day. Maybe the increase of inflation is less than it was a couple of years ago. It clearly is. Gas prices are down. That's great. They're nowhere near where they were when he took office. And so, trying to contend that everything is fine is just ridiculous.
Greg, this is the main topic in today's Morning Jolt newsletter. And I put in, I believe, a, past the paywall link to that Bloomberg article. If you're wondering about the state of the economy and why things seem so much more expensive, you should read it. And it's something of a great irony that this was published right around the time Biden was going out and giving this happy talk and insisting that this was, the fourth cheapest Thanksgiving on record. Well, there's a bunch of things that, if you're saying that doesn't sound right, well, there are quite a few caveats. The first is they've only been keeping records since 1986, so that's not really on record. It's since this group, the American Farm Bureau Federation, started putting together this measurement. For those wondering, the measurement, they measure the cost of a 16-pound turkey, pumpkin pie mix, milk, carrots and celery tray, rolls, pie crust, green peas, fresh cranberries, whipping cream, sweet potatoes, and cubed stuffing. But then in 2018, they added both the classic dinner and then they did an updated version that added a 4-pound boneless ham, russet potatoes, and green beans. If you go back and look at the release from the American Farm Bureau Association, it was not actually happy talk. It was not actually saying things are great. It said that it's down from 2022, 4.5% less than last year's record high average of 64.05. But a Thanksgiving meal is still 25% higher than it was in 2019, which highlights the impact high supply costs and inflation have had on food prices since before the pandemic. We've seen this from Biden and his team pretty much since the entirety of his presidency, that they will find some economic indicator that looks good and they will tout it, and they're entitled to do that. But then they will kind of believe, like, well, we're going to, oh, look how low the unemployment rate is. Okay, yeah, that's good. But, or, oh, look, wage growth is up. Okay. But if wage growth is up, but it's not keeping pace with inflation, well, then by golly, you feel like your dollar doesn't go as far and you feel poorer, even if you are making more than you were a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. There are no doubt some Americans who are making more now than they were 3 or 4 years ago. And their rate of increase in their salary has increased more than the rate of inflation. There's another chunk of Americans where it's probably been about the same. And I think that there's a significant chunk of Americans who have had their wages go up, but it has not kept pace with inflation. The administration can brag that right now it's 3.2% year over year. And that's good. Glad to hear that. That's nice, but that is not necessarily, that was 8% higher than the year before. And that number was 6% higher than the price of the year before. As listeners no doubt remember, for years and years, the inflation rate was anywhere from 0. We even had a little bit of deflation here and there, to about 1 to maybe 2.5%. If it got to 3%, we thought it was hot. Wow, that's kind of surprising. Well, now it's 3.2%, and the Biden administration wants to spike the football. The Biden administration is measuring inflation by the rate of change in the prices, but people's perception of inflation is shaped by the prices themselves. And I'd urge everyone, take a look at that Bloomberg article because it really kind of puts into perspective. And as you mentioned, the electricity bills, the natural gas bills, all the little ways that it adds up bit by bit. And people feel like they're just getting squeezed. And they still think, yes, we recognize inflation's not 9% year over year anymore. But it's not like anything got cheap. And the other thing, I saw this comment on Twitter. I think it was Logan Dobson. He's going to get credit for it one way or the other because I can't remember if it was anybody else. And he pointed out that, if your wages have gone up since before the pandemic, you probably feel like you earned that it was not some sort of Biden administration policy that got you that raise. Maybe you changed jobs. Maybe you found a job that was paying better. So in other words, you're making more money than you were back in 2019, but in your mind, you deserve that. You earned that. The higher prices you're paying for everything else, you don't feel like you deserve that. You didn't, say, oh, I'm going to do that. So the other thing, which I think is, a really useful, and I think this Bloomberg article hones in on, I think people's perception of normal does not date from January 2021, which is when Biden took office. I think their perception of normal probably stopped sometime around February 2020, maybe,
right.
a good stretch of before the pandemic. And the Biden team can say, look, we only took office in 2021. You can't blame us for everything that happened before then. Okay. But the primary driver of all this inflation was a giant spending spree that continued. And here's the thing, it's not just that Biden spent a lot because in January 2021, the pandemic wasn't over. They were just starting to roll out the vaccines and they still needed to spend a lot of money. It was also that they took the emergency burst of spending in 2020 and that became part of the baseline of the normal spending. And that's one of the reasons we are running $1 trillion deficits, even in a time of comparable prosperity. Unemployment rate is low and comparable peace, although I think that probably could be disputed at this point, considering the state of the world. But in other words, that people, starting Biden came into office, he had he had a barely Democratic controlled Senate, he had a Democratic controlled House, and they spent a ton of money. So much money that we had more money available than goods. So prices went up. I put in a link to the DuckTales episode from the 1980s. If you double the amount of money in everybody's pocket, prices go up because the money has increased, but the amount of goods has not increased at a comparable level. That's what causes inflation. And it's for some, Biden either never saw it or was always in denial about it. And that's what's going on here. So first of all, kudos to Bloomberg for what I think is really good economic journalism and really putting into perspective and not using the measuring stick of January 20th, 2021, but using what were prices before the pandemic, because I think that's what gets people their sense of normalcy. And I think that's what, until prices feel like they're reasonable, feel like you're not getting gouged and getting screwed over every time you go to fill up your tank, every time you go shopping for groceries, you're going around doing Christmas or Hanukkah shopping this time of year. That's, people feel it and they're going to be irritated at the president. And that is one of the reasons for the president's relatively low approval rating.
No, that's very well explained. It's very well explained. And the American people can't be fooled on this. We've said this a million times. And the other thing that drives me nuts is that the Biden administration will take credit for the drop in year over year, which has happened since inflation was at the worst numbers in 40 years. But the reason they're down is not because of Biden administration policy. It's because of interest rate hikes that came in response to Biden and his administration and the Democrats and Republicans in Congress refusing to get serious about spending. One of the things we're seeing now, because people aren't selling their houses because with these interest rates, they can't afford a new one, is that with a small inventory, demand goes up for that small inventory. Prices of houses, appraisals go up, and that means property taxes go up. So on top of everything else they're dealing with, higher property taxes are in there as well, which I did not see in the Bloomberg story, but is certainly something people are very, very aware of.
Hey, y'all, this is Sarah from The Sarah Carter Show. Thanks for listening to 3 Martini Lunch. We could all benefit from heart-healthy energy, especially in this busy time of the year. One of the best ways to do that is to support your blood pressure and circulation with Super Beets Heart Chews. Paired with a healthy lifestyle, the antioxidants in Super Beets are clinically shown to be nearly 2 times more effective at promoting normal blood pressure than healthy lifestyle alone. And let me tell you something, when I'm traveling to New York, when I'm moving around the country, I need to feel optimum. I want to stay healthy and I want to feel energized. And I do that with Super Beets Heart Chews. I absolutely love the flavor. I know you will too. And I know you're going to feel great. They're a convenient way to support healthy blood pressure. Super Beets Heart Chews are plant-based and easy to add to your routine. No pills to swallow, no ingredients to mix or prepare. Double your potential with Super Beets Heart Chews. Get a free 30-day supply of Super Beets Heart Chews and a free full-size bag of turmeric chews valued at $25 by going to americalovesbeets.com. Get this exclusive offer only at americalovesbeets.com. That's americalovesbeets.com.
All right, Jim, on to our bad martini now. Joe Biden, as it relates to Israel policy, better perhaps than some of us may have expected. In other ways, he's been kind of waffly. We talked about it just yesterday with pushing for an extended pause in contrast to the need to take the fight to Hamas. But now we have a new story coming out, as reported in the Daily Mail, about Biden's weakness when face-to-face with people who are very critical of him, particularly on the left. And I think this explains a lot about Joe Biden and why he should not be president. And that is that just a couple of weeks after the horrendous Hamas attacks on Israel, he was asked about the civilian casualties in Gaza as reported by the Palestinians. And as you can hear in this extended clip with the question and the answer, Biden was not buying the numbers given by the Hamas Health Ministry, officially the Palestinians, when it came to casualties.
In the 18 days since Hamas killed 1,400 Israelis, the Hamas-controlled Gaza Health Ministry says Israeli forces have killed over 6,000 Palestinians, including 2,700 children. You've previously asked Netanyahu to minimize civilian casualties. Do these numbers say to you that he is ignoring that message?
What they say to me is I have no notion that the Palestinians are telling the truth about how many people are killed. I'm sure innocents have been killed, and it's the price of waging a war. I think we should be incredibly careful. I think not we, the Israelis should be incredibly careful to be sure that they're focusing on going after the folks that are propagating this war against Israel. And it's against their interest when that doesn't happen. But I have no confidence in the number that the Palestinians are using.
Yet the very next day, according to the Washington Post, Keith Ellison, who is the Minnesota Attorney General now, you may remember him as being a very radical member of Congress, and a bunch of other very prominent Muslims came to the office and basically debated with the president beyond their time limit for the meeting and berated him essentially for not accepting the casualty figures. And as the conversation went on, Biden eventually backed down and crumbled and apologized for his words and actions, reportedly telling them, quote, "I'm sorry. I'm disappointed in myself. I will do better." Jim, if you can't stand up to Hamas talking points, maybe you're not in the right job.
Yeah, look, we rip into the president pretty regularly on this podcast. And compared to a lot of other issues, Biden has been pretty good on Israel. But I would say as this conflict is going on, he's getting less good. We talked about how pretty much since the moment Israel began its counteroffensive in response to Hamas's deliberate breaking through a wall and committing a massacre, that Biden kept saying, be careful. You have to do everything you can to avoid civilian casualties. And I use the comparison of it's that right time of year. You're putting up the Christmas decorations and your spouse tells you to be careful. Yes, thank you, honey. I'm up. I'm in this body. I'm very aware of the fact that I'm up on the roof or up on a ladder or something like that. That there was nothing particularly helpful about the kind of hectoring about avoiding civilian casualties from the Biden team and from the president. So it's hard to like this president. I find it very hard to like this president because even when he does something right, And in the early statements in this conflict, Biden was probably at the best we've ever seen him, or at least, certainly the speeches in which I was applauding the most. But he backtracks. He hates being criticized by anybody, particularly he's very sensitive to criticism from the left. And, there was apparently this story in, the Washington Post detail that there was this big internal dissension within the White House of, very much we've seen in Capitol Hill, we've seen in lots of other institutions, young, very progressive, hard left staffers lecturing their bosses about how the Israeli policies are so unjust and this is the genocide of the Palestinians and blah, blah, blah. And the older staffers, who I would argue have a better sense of the world and a clearer moral perspective on how Hamas is the ultimate one responsible for this and how, you tell Israel to avoid civilian casualties against an opponent who intertwines itself with civilians at every opportunity, never wears uniforms, operates in tunnels, takes hostage, that in the end, what you're asking Israel to do is not really fight back. You've put so many moral constraints on Israel that they cannot eliminate the threat of Hamas, and thus they have to live with the threat in perpetuity. It sounds like Biden just can't, the moment this comes on, he'll back down. And it would have been really nice to hear Biden say, no, I don't trust the Hamas authorities. I don't trust the Gaza Health Administration, which is answers to Hamas. Every institution in the Middle East is clear on this. Everybody knows that the Gaza Health Ministry is a branch of Hamas. They have every incentive to exaggerate civilian casualties. They have every incentive to downplay actual military casualties. I'm sorry, I just don't believe them. But Biden couldn't do that. Biden is afraid when somebody else criticizes. He's afraid of being, painted as an old, out of touch, insufficiently progressive old man. And so he knuckles under. And that's what we've seen. Now, maybe at some point, some other group of pro-Israel Democrats will come into the White House and criticize Biden on this. And who knows, maybe he'll flip back and apologize to that group and say, I'm disappointed in myself for saying that I was disappointed in myself.
Probably. I could see that happening potentially. And then, of course, he's in the pickle of telling everybody what they want to hear instead of actually having his own mind.
In the end, Biden doesn't like the idea of anybody being mad at him. And it's somewhat understandable, but guess what? You signed up for this job. When you're president, you can't make everybody happy. You have to decide, which side and you have to decide either I'm going to trust the Gaza Health Ministry / Hamas numbers, or you don't. But you can't flip back and forth depending on who you're talking to. Well, you can, but that's not good leadership.
All right, let's talk about our great sponsor for today, and that is 4Patriots, makers of many fine products. We have told you many times about the Patriot Power Generator 2000X, but there's also plenty of other products that they have. The Patriot Power Blender, the Sun Kettle Solar Cooker, and you can grow your own stuff like the Leafy Green Hydro Garden and Floral Seed Kits can get you started with that. But speaking of stuff to eat, they're also the makers of the best-selling survival food kits, which are delicious tasting. They come with real meat and vegetables, and they're designed to last for 25 years. Also, portable for taking on camping trips or picnics. Good in an emergency, though. Most importantly, if your power is out, all you got to do is boil water over a fire, simmer, and serve. Then you can just enjoy hot meals and stay safe until your power is restored or whatever else is happening outside your house. Visit 4patriots.com/martini to see this week's discounts and deals before they are gone, and to get free shipping on orders over $97. Save more and get peace of mind now by going to the number 4patriots.com/martini. That's 4patriots.com/martini. All right, Jim, on to our crazy martini now, but there could be a splash of bad here, depending on how you assess this, I guess. This is Education Secretary Miguel Cardona yesterday when talking about how he's ready to help governors and states with whatever program he's talking about here. The program is not the point of this, but he tries to quote Ronald Reagan unironically about government being ready to help. Take a listen.
We're going to set up follow-up calls with every governor we met with to make sure we're available. As I think it was President Reagan said, we're from the government. We're here to help.
Now, for those who are too young to remember or just don't remember, even though they might be old enough to remember the Reagan years, this is how Ronald Reagan actually viewed government help.
I think you all know that I've always felt the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
So, Jim, first of all, it's just great to have a Reagan clip in the 3 Martini Lunch today. The question here is whether Cardona honestly doesn't know the Reagan quote, which would be troubling, or potentially he does know it, but just like Obama tried to do back in the day in spending money on transportation or something else, he tried to co-opt Reagan. Or he's just trying to gaslight us that Reagan was a big government guy, which, 40 years after the fact, maybe he can get some people to believe. But so he either doesn't know what he's talking about or he's deliberately misleading us, is the way I see it.
Greg, this is one of those times where I'm irritated that this idiotic comment, like if he meant sarcasm, you'd figure there'd be some indication, some wink, some, chuckle or joke or something like that, because the quote of Reagan means the exact opposite of the point he's trying to make. But I only saw this after my distinguished double colleague, Ramesh Ponnuru, saw it. And just, I am downright envious of how he just went off on a tear about similar misremembered quotes from American history. It was Barry Goldwater who said, "The pursuit of justice is no virtue." I said more, of course. Extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice. And William Jennings Bryan, who told us to crucify mankind upon a cross of gold. Who can forget David Farragut's great anti-war cry, "Damn the torpedoes"? Then, of course, the replies started going, and man, oh man, I got to point out, congratulations to Milk Toast, whoever that is. Quote, "I believe it was Jesus Christ who said, 'Cast the first stone.'" But I'm thinking, think about, where America would be if Patrick Henry had not said, "Give me death." And John F. Kennedy famously telling Americans to lower their expectations, "Ask not what your country can do for you." You can have a lot of fun with a lot of these. And, that's probably the best way to react to this. By the way, how appropriate is it that we have this egregious, painfully ironic misquote or erroneous understanding of history from the man who's the Secretary of Education, Greg?
Oh, man. Yeah. Know your history. If you're too young, ask your parents. And if they're too young, ask your grandparents, I guess. But we're getting up there as we remember these great moments from Reagan, who could distill very, very well people's mistrust of government. And if you go back to our first martini and the gaslighting they're trying to do on the economy, there's a reason why you shouldn't trust the government to help you in most cases here. Anyway, Jim, have a good day. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. Do subscribe to our podcast. If you don't already, tell some friends about us as well. Also, thank you for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch Podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a terrific Tuesday and join us again on Wednesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.